Ingram Smith, but Elliott back again for another episode of the Nolecast. As always, we will thank our sponsors, Louisiana Hot Sauce, Tarpon Cellars Wine Company. Very much look forward to having some Tarpon Cellars wine at an event that we're planning for the spring game. The Battle's End is planning for the spring game, but if you're up and around, love to have you out there as well. Have that at Langford Green day of the event. I'll put that on Twitter.
Langford
Honestly,
Green, nice.
didn't mean to start the show with a promo of the Battle's End there, but Tarpon Cellars will be around, and I imagine Bottle of Louisiana Hot Sauce or so might be out there as well. But we'll have a vast majority of the football team, if not the entirety of the football team, out there with the availability for autographs the morning of the spring game. And as I said, keep your eyes out on this space, whether it be my Twitter or the Battle's End Twitter, and we'll have more information for you about that. So, Bud, fun little show that we have for you today. Looking back at the scrimmages that have taken place, we had a second scrimmage here. This is going to be interesting in general about what's left of spring, because I just don't know that there's a whole lot more to find out about this team. I mean, you really know what you have at this point, and if you're of the opinion that, hey, you'd like to bolster this position group or this position, whatever it may be. And then for the most part, and I'll be interested in your opinion on this, I'm more kind of watching what's left of spring to try to figure out what's going to happen in 24 and 25 and stuff like that. I think that's more where the conversation is. I mean, the pieces that you have along the defensive line, you know what you've got, and some of your strengths at skill on offense. Everybody's eyes will try to figure out what the final five grouping is on the offensive line. That's probably the biggest kind of yet to be determined thing, and that'll be determined by both play and eligibility and health and some other issues out there. But just interested. I think that's what you want if you are a healthy, functional roster. Yeah, you may have the occasional battle at quarterback or something like that, but spring's not necessarily to set up what's going to happen 4 or 5 months from now. It's really more to get a broader idea as to where your roster is, and if there's holes in it in the years to come, gives you an idea as to maybe how you could address them. So
I think that's fair, man. I asked a pretty good source of mine. I was like, do you think this is like a national championship roster? And he gave me the same answer he gave me about 5-6 months ago. He's like, probably not. He said, but the depth that this team has at most spots is really good, right? And I think that's what you're alluding to where, like, do they have a lot of guys that are going to be first round picks? No. Do they have anybody who's going to be a first round pick? Maybe, but like, I don't know that you bet your life on right now are going to be a first round pick. I mean, Verse is probably the most likely. I think Johnny Wilson is somebody who I am really impressed with some of the highlights that he has come down with. Not just the catches, because the guy makes highlight catches. He just doesn't always make the routine catches so far in his career. But the route running on some of these routes that he's actually catching the ball on is much better, right? And that is hard to control that big of a body, honestly. And so that is something that I think it's really encouraging for you. So like when I'm thinking about spring, I'm like, okay, are there any spots where they don't have the depth that you want? There's a lot of spots where you're very encouraged by the depth that they do have. And then can anybody emerge as like a next level guy, right? If you got into a game against a Georgia, or if Bama bounces back this year to more like top 2 level Bama as opposed to just what they dropped to like 4th or 5th in some of the power ratings this past year, all the way to 4th, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, who do you have that can bang with a team like that? That actually, who do you have that keeps Kirby Smart or Nick Saban up at night, right? And I think Jordan may be one of those guys. I actually posted a pretty cool graphic on our Nolecast Instagram tonight showing basically his sport radar from StatsBomb, which I thought was pretty cool, and he rates really, really well in almost all the stats. I like, who do we think scares the elite teams on this team? Because I think a lot of teams would trade for FSU's depth because of the veteran nature of this ball club. Like, I'm relatively happy, I think, with what's coming out of spring, with the exception of kicker. Because, I mean, dude.
Yeah,
can't just keep missing these kicks.
It's been concerning.
Now, you may not play very many close games, so it may not matter all that much. But the most important games, it probably does matter.
Yes, it has a way of mattering, definitely. Now, to get back to what you're saying, I don't know that they'd necessarily keep him up at night, but like I think you've got one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks, one of the 3 or 4 best running backs, and if Johnny continues to progress, maybe you've got a 4 to 6 best wide receiver in the country or something like that, which is exciting because you're starting to put together, in my opinion, both skill and difference makers. Now,
Yeah.
the draft question is a little bit different with Benson just because of the valuation of running back in the draft. I'm not comparing Benson to the Texas running back, but I'm fascinated to see where that kid goes, just so that we get another data point as to what a really impressive running back actually goes for in the draft in the year 2023. But I agree with the assessment of the person that you spoke with there that, can we sit here in early April and say with absolute certainty this is like a playoff team? I mean, I also hope we all have perspective as to the fact that we're even having this question 2 years from, the season that you had 2 years ago. It's pretty freaking remarkable turnaround. But when you go out there, like when I have had the opportunity to go to practice or when I've had the chance to go to spring, it's impressive to see individual pieces. But what really stands out to you is you're like, damn, that's a third team defense. And that secondary is pretty good. And that defensive line is still pretty good. I mean, I do think that just the casual fan, even still, it's going to get hit in the face. I'm speaking obviously metaphorically. It's going to be a pretty nice smack as to exactly how talented and deep this roster is. For those of you that are, going to the spring or have a chance to watch the spring online or ESPN or wherever the game's going to be shown this year. But it's a great barometer for where the program's gone and the pretty drastic direction turn it's done over the last 3 years or so.
By the way, it sounds like Bless Harris, I know you praised a lot in our last episode, had a pretty nice scrimmage as well. So that's very, very encouraging. You mentioned Trey, so I'll just throw this out there before we kind of get to discussion of more some spring takeaways. We had a Patreon listener here, patreon.com/Nolecast, become a supporter of the show. We always appreciate your support there. They're like, hey, I'm a major college fantasy player. What do I do with Trey Benson? Like, do we think that Trey Benson is going to be a 200 or 210 carry guy? Because if so, with his per carry averages and his size and the speed and the fact that FSU's competition for most weeks is pretty bad, like, he should be a first round pick in college fantasy football. He's like, on the other hand, if he's like a 170 carry guy, not so much, because his touchdown share, like, he's not exactly a goal line specialist, even though he's a big back. And they do have Jordan, and they do run some of this jet sweep stuff on the goal line, or at least they did when they had Pittman. I'm not saying they won't do that anymore because they did a little bit of that at Memphis as well.
Didn't Lundy have 2 or 3 touchdowns last year
Right,
as well?
yeah.
I mean,
Lundy vultured one in the bowl game, right?
Yeah.
So, like, his touchdown volume would have to be so great for him to justify a first round pick on Benson if he was not a legit 200, 210 carry type guy. 170 there is like, we can get into this. Like, I'm not really sure if he needs to have 170 carries for FSU to get their goals, but just for college fantasy and to drill down onto the player. I mean, this is a guy we know FSU values really heavily. He's a very good player. And I don't know, man, like, Atkins and Norvell have, for the most part, gone running back by committee. But if you go back to his Memphis days, we were doing this pre-show. He had a guy carry the ball 230 times in his last year at Memphis. And in 2018, he had 2 dudes carry the ball 210 times each. And then he had one guy carry the ball for 78 times in 2018. That was a number 3 back. His name was Tony Pollard. He's the reason that the Cowboys felt okay cutting Zeke Elliott, as well as Zeke's contract, just enormous. But I don't know, man. Like, 200 carries, regular season carries. Do we think 12 games?
It's a good number. It is hard for me to immediate give a response to only because you've got 4 really good backs, 5. I almost have a hard time. This is not a knock on Toafili, but I don't always mentally list him as a running back because of just how you use him, and he's really, um, I don't know, jack of all trades has kind of become a backhanded compliment. And that's not what I'm trying to say at all. He's just talented, and kid has an opportunity to get involved in the passing game.
Especially with some of your no huddle and stuff. Like if you don't have to sub with Toafili in there, you can move him out to the slot, and like with Pittman out. I mean, that's a valuable weapon. Sorry, go ahead.
No, very.
It's definitely not a knock on him to be called a jack of all trades or a multi-purpose weapon.
Rodney Hill was the best player at the scrimmage that I attended a week ago. I'm not giving away any secrets when I tell you the staff really thinks a lot of Rodney Hill. At the same time, you've got this incredibly talented running back who is physically gifted, almost beyond description, with Benson, who's still figuring out how to play the position, really. I mean, you're not to give this kid a decent amount of carries is not necessarily doing him an injustice on the long term. You still kind of got to figure out just the basics of playing running back. So, you may have a situation where you continue to work Benson in a couple of games just because you're still trying to bring him up to speed of the position and to get him more comfortable with it. At the same time, Keziah Holmes, CJ Campbell, nice backs. You want to continue to work into the rotation as well. Close your ears, bud. I don't want to give away any snap count draft stuff, but I would put the number somewhere around 185, 190 at this point for Benson. Just as not snap counts, but pure carries based off both what he has the potential to do and some of the past use of running backs in Mike's offense.
And this is also where you kind of get into some of your scheduling projections, right? There are a certain number of games here where you're going to be favored really big. Like you're probably a large favorite at Boston College. You're going to be favored big over Southern Miss. By the way, the Clemson transfer might win the job for the Golden Eagles. I did see that. Frank Gore Jr. sat out their spring game, and the transfer they got from Memphis apparently had a big day for them. Like Virginia Tech, unless they really make massive strides on their offense, I have a hard time seeing them scoring very many points because they were just like bottom 15 in the country last year when I look at my offensive sheet. Syracuse lost a number of guys who are going to be top 4 or 5 round picks, and I just don't think they're going to replace that very well. Duke, I guess we'll see. Wake, I pretty much always trust Wake to be a tough game under Dave Clawson. Like they're really well coached. They know what they're supposed to do. Pitt, probably not easy. Miami could come to play. Florida, I could tell you that the staff still has a lot of respect for that Gators roster, right? The physicality of it. So I won't say that's easy. North Alabama, clearly a walkover. Does Benson get 15 carries against North Alabama, Duke, Cuse, Vatech, Boston College, or Southern Miss? I mean, there may be some game in which he gets 22 or 25 carries or something like that, but not regularly. So I think I agree with you there, man. I don't think he gets 200 carries in the regular season. Now, maybe if you count the bowl game or something like that, or if they happen to make the playoff or
Playoffs, definitely.
Conference title game.
Yeah, got that one too.
They play 15 games. I think he'll definitely get 200, but
Yeah. No, Benson's it'll be fun. Benson's just a truly unique talent who's, like I said, still learning how to play the position, and certainly had some flashes last year at the end of the season that made you think that you don't have to be crazy Florida State fan to extrapolate some pretty wild ideas as to what he might be possible or have the potential to do this year. So,
all right. I'm going to throw another one at you here. I think this one's kind of fun. Where does FSU have to finish in the college ball playoff rankings for Jodan Travis to win the Heisman? Like, what's the lowest you think they could finish for him to actually win it?
So is this the final ranking, or is this the rankings?
Not after the national champion is crowned, but like the one like post conference championship games.
Okay. Yeah.
The one that decides who goes to the playoff.
Sure. I tried to dissect this earlier. Just don't know that you can. I mean, my feeble-minded dissection was that you have to beat LSU from a Florida State perspective. You have to beat LSU and Clemson once for that to be the case, which I guess if you beat LSU first and then Clemson the first time and lose to them in the conference championship game, then maybe you're not a playoff contender. But I tend to think that if you win, lose, win, you've got a pretty decent chance of being a playoff team. And I think that's what's necessary. I mean, I know if Jordan's going to win the Heisman, the one prereq that I know you have to have is you got to beat LSU. Otherwise, you're going to have the SEC pom pom waivers out there all year saying, "Well, yeah, nice stats. Didn't happen when he played the best team that he played all year." So now maybe look if he goes out there and he's 41 of 47 for 422 yards and 119 yards on the ground or so, some video game like performance and Florida State loses 48 to 45. Yeah, maybe there's some caveats around there, but in general, I think you've got to be a college football playoff team for Jordan to be sitting in the front row of the New York Athletic Club come second or third weekend in December or whatever it is.
I think that's fair. I could see a scenario maybe as long as they're on that final graphic because they show like 5 and 6 the first two out basically on the final graphic. Okay, here's 5, here's 6, and they build up like here's 4, here's 3.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's some situation in which he could be on the final graphic. If let's say if USC is not in it and North Carolina is not in it, and maybe Georgia's quarterback has a bit of a pedestrian. Just relative to normal Heisman standards type year. Are we really going to give the Heisman Trophy to like a Brock Bowers, who's a tight end at Georgia?
Mm-hmm.
Their schedule is so bad that Georgia's schedule is a lot easier than FSU's is. So, which is crazy, but FSU plays a tougher SEC team than Georgia plays this year because they play LSU.
I was going to say, see the SEC East
right
now.
And their non-con is a total joke. So I could see it like maybe Bama runs the ball more this year with a first-time starter. Michigan, McCarthy doesn't have like huge numbers. I could see a situation in which this becomes a battle of quarterbacks on non-playoff teams who were like very close to the playoff, who had big-time numbers. And maybe it's Caleb. Maybe USC loses 3 times. FSU loses once. They finish 5th or 6th or something like that. Not that I want this to happen, obviously. And then he gets it. But I do think they have to be like seriously in contention deep into November for that to happen. Right. So I don't know. It's interesting. Like the odds to make the playoff, win the playoff are out, but the odds to actually make the playoff are not quite out yet. So I guess we'll compare those to Jordan's Heisman odds and take a look here in a little bit.
As a gambling man, what do you make of Florida State and Clemson having the same odds to win the national championship?
They also basically have the same odds to win the division to win the conference at Caesars when those came out last week. The only thing in the ACC I really wanted to bet when I saw that come out was Louisville at 14-1, right? Not that I think Louisville will win the league, because I don't think Louisville is going to win the ACC. But if you guys haven't noticed this, have we gone over Louisville's schedule here on this pod?
I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago, if I recall correctly, but
okay,
I'm not a great person for short-term historical references right now. I'll put it that way.
All right. Well, if your listener or if our listeners do not have this committed to memory, Louisville's ACC schedule this year is Georgia Tech, Boston College, NC State, Pitt, Duke, Vatech, UVA, Miami.
Yeah, we did this.
No North Carolina, no FSU, no Clemson.
Yeah.
So there is a real scenario in which Braum gives them a little bit of a jump start, and they go 7-1 in the league. It's very possible. right? Like I don't know that they will, but I think it is certainly possible, or even 8-0, right? Uh, and if in that case, like the tiebreaker is going to be interesting because you will have no head-to-head tiebreaker with Clemson or with the Noles. I kind of think like I think that it's fair for Clemson and FSU have the same odds to win the league, right? To me, that is an acknowledgement that Clemson did win in your place last year, right? And it's also an acknowledgement that the Noles have gotten a lot better through the transfer portal, through the development of some of their high school players, and probably also a head nod again to Dabo making at least one of the big staff changes that probably needed to be made with bringing in Garrett Riley and jettisoning just some of those guys that have been there a while, and they probably needed some fresh ideas there in Clemson because most defenses, not most, a number of defenses were able to shut those guys down fairly easily, and we'll see if FSU can do that this year. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think it's accurate. I think it's interesting that you go to Clemson and yet you still have the same odds on that. Yeah, I'm basically going to reiterate what you said. I think it's a reflection of the two rosters changing. I think it'll be a interesting historical perspective or historical data point in a couple years for those who want to go out there and evaluate the use of the portal and embracing it and the very different approach that the two different staffs have taken towards the portal. It's fascinating, man. I mean, we are far from unbiased, or at least I am. But it certainly feels like the two programs are kind of starting to head back to level footing a little bit more. And certainly not the drastic disparity that has existed for 8 years or so between the two. So just be fascinating, interesting to see. Clemson's continued to recruit well, and I do think that they did themselves some favors with the staff changes that they made in the summer. Definitely.
I will also note this. I think South Carolina's recruiting class finished like 15th or something. I really strongly like what they did at the high school level. Like, I think that's what South Carolina did. Like they're not going to win a lot of battles for 5-star type kids, just probably unlikely. They really shot their shot with some guys who have high upside, and I mean, it wouldn't shock me if South Carolina closes the gap a little bit. I know they actually beat Clemson last year, but that was probably on the very low end of the range at which Clemson with that roster probably plays for the most part.
Yeah.
And South Carolina also played really poorly for about, I don't know, 9 of the 12 weeks of the season.
They
It would
did.
not
They had
shock
a
me if they
nice little
close
2
the
to
gap.
3 week window at the end there that helped save face. But yeah, it was a rough season.
So if you are thinking that you're going to annually, the most, not that you're going to play in this game annually or that Clemson will annually, although recently it has kind of been Clemson, and before that it was you. If we're thinking like the most likely individual outcome on a yearly basis is the Noles and Clemson, it is helpful that Clemson has to play a real game before that game, as opposed to what had happened basically from like, I don't know, 15 or 16 to 2021. I mean, they're rarely challenged. It was just usually a walkover, right? If they actually have to play a real game, that kind of helps you because they really can't take 2 weeks to prep for you. Much like FSU can basically never take the Florida game off, with the exception of like 2013, where they actually kind of played like they were going to take the game off for about the first 10 minutes and still walked away with it because the Gators were playing Morningweg at quarterback. Remember that? It was just, oh gosh.
This is the Kelvin Benjamin game too.
The Kelvin Benjamin game.
Yeah.
Florida was like, how much can we clutch and grab without getting called here?
That's right.
And
that's right. Yeah.
They were just grabby, like the most grabby game I think you'll ever see.
So while we're sitting here talking about the state of South Carolina, for as much as we are, bud, it would be remiss of me not to do this. South Carolina, always, many listeners from us, and I have mentioned this before, we don't have exact analytics on this, but you can take a pretty good look at it. And Clemson is by far the largest fan base that listens to the Nolecast. It's not Florida State, and that's great. And Clemson has some great fans, and I welcome that, and I'd be particularly wrong not to point them in the direction of the Perry Insurance Group in South Carolina. And I bring them up because they are the 10th business to join with Congruity. I've been meaning to
There we
shout them out
go.
for about a month and a half now. Perry Insurance Group is in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Perry Stalvey is the looks like the principal there, and he is a massive Florida State fan. How do I know this, bud? Because he was actually the guy that bought the Trey Benson jersey that I
Oh, dude,
procured
nice.
last year before the season started as part of our gentleman's Trey Benson bet. So Perry is a fantastic Nole, appears to have a very successful insurance group there, speaks wildly high of Matt Lewis and his team, and said that he had listened to us for a long time, and kind of jokingly said on the 99th time of hearing you and I mention congruity, he chose to reach out to Matt and his team, and had a great experience with Matt. And it sounds like he had a great experience with Chris, another member of his team, to help set them up on a couple of different benefit packages. So great that the message keeps growing. I've recently read something that, like, the neuroscience of podcasting suggests that you may need to hear something 25 to 35 times on a podcast before you start to move on it. So just interesting to see a note like that. But big thanks to Congruity, Matt Lewis and his team, and fantastic to see us find another business for him, and one that happens to be geographically located and relevant to the discussion that we're having at the time.
That is fantastic, man. Awesome. Congrats to Perry Insurance and congrats to Congruity. That 10 is, I mean, like, we talk 500 with loans to Legendary, but, like, a home loan and flipping a business to like for their payroll and HR solutions, it's a little bit different. So I used to, like, can we sell loans? I think we could sell loans. Let's try it. And now it's like, can we sell payroll and HR solutions? Let's do it. Awesome, man. That is really great. I really love how our listeners support the show and support our advertisers. And there's a lot of stuff we turn down.
Yeah.
And I think that's really helped long term. I mean, I don't know what Congruity's renewal rate is. I had to text everybody, but I think it's 100%. So, like, that's pretty good for folks who try Congruity are sticking with it, right? And that's what we want.
Yeah.
And obviously I was going to say recidivism rate, but that's not the right term to use for a whole, like what repeat customer rate, excuse me, is the rate we're trying to cite here. Shout out to a friend of mine, Geiska, who actually just got his loan through the Legendary team, 844 FSU loan, 844 FSU loan. I did go back and check. It is 844, by the way.
Yes.
Last week.
855 evidently is one of the few remaining spicy phone numbers, if you get me out there. So, apologies if I accidentally sent your, I don't know why your 15-year-old's looking for a mortgage, but anyways, yeah. 844 is the three numbers that lead that phone number.
So anyway, guys could text me, and I actually didn't ask if I could share this, but I don't think there's any other personal details. Hey, Shannon went above and beyond for me. He's A+, as you know. The whole thing was a blank show to start. He handled it great, and then he kind of goes on some family details of how it was actually, like, passed down through the estate. But we're really happy they were able to get it done for him. And shirts are in the mail.
Yes, we've got
this is literal podcast housekeeping being done.
We've got a whole team coming over. We're getting another round of them out, and not that the battles in the Nolecast get blended in together all that frequently, but I've got about 380 welcome packages to send out for the battle's end as well. So we've got the fulfillment team lined up. I'll put it that way.
Fulfillment team. I like it. Oh man! All right, so. Are you surprised? What do we make of Adam Fuller? Kind of just, was it a call out of the safeties? Just is it like, hey, it's time to get going here? Like that's I don't know, kind of how I took it, but you could tell he wants more out of that group by his comments.
Yeah, I do believe that is it. I think the thought is that Shaheem's a talented guy. I mean, they knew that within the first 10 days of getting him on campus. They just want to get more familiar with what's being asked of him. He's taken a step up as far as a guy that what was his? I don't know his number off the top of my head. I'm going to guess that Shaheem, I don't know, 300 snaps somewhere in the area, a number that started with a 3 last year,
Yeah.
probably closer to a 5 this year. And then Akeem Dent, is a really solid player who you kind of have hope and optimism that between talent and experience has a chance to have a real breakout year this year. So I certainly think that's what it's in line with. Duke Cooper's moved over there, and there's been some positive response to that. There's no bigger Travis J guy out there in the world. I think like the only Instagram DM I've ever sent was one to him 2 or 3 years ago, the first year that NIL was allowed, trying to get a Nolecast NIL deal with him, ironically enough. So, yeah, we'll just see, man. I think there's some nice pieces at the safety level, and obviously Dent has a different level of experience than the rest of them, and kind of reasons for varying level of optimism with everybody back there. You just probably like to have a little bit more of a roadmap as to who's going to take those snaps and have one other person really emerge at that position.
All right. One guy who will not emerge is Derek McClendon, who has officially announced that he will hit the transfer portal. Are you actually allowed to go in yet? I guess is he a graduate transfer, so he can go in now? If not, he
Yes.
can go in on May 1st.
As a graduate, my understanding is that you can enter immediately, and Derek will be, in theory, benefited by that, just because he will be. I don't think the window opens again until April 16th. So in theory, he'll be, you know, probably. I don't know. I haven't looked at the portal at this position group in particular. He'll probably be one of the few defensive ends that's out there with multi-year starter type snaps under his belt, and he'll be a commodity in someone's eyes. I'm sure, absolutely.
I may have my dates wrong on this. I thought it opened on May 1st and it closes on like May 15th or 17th or something like that. But I may be wrong there.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. I do think it's.
The only reason it's top of mind is because we were doing our show planning for Cover 3 today. It's just like, all right, like we need to we try to plan this stuff about a month out. Are we thinking it's a different date now for this?
Let me look, man. I was literally just having this conversation. Just to make sure I'm right here with you.
All right. So while Ingram looks that up, so McClendon is a fine player and a guy who, if he didn't start, would have played a decent number of snaps for you and did last year. He's also not somebody who, in my opinion, is on track based on his play so far in college to be drafted, to have somebody who's going to make a career playing professional football in the NFL, like a guy that is going to be in there long enough to get a pension. Now, maybe he really blows up somewhere. It's certainly possible, but I don't think he's necessarily head and shoulders over other guys on this roster. And there's a real scenario in which the number of snaps he gets this year, if he remains on the roster, decreases from what it was last year. All it would take is like Gilbert Edmond playing a lot better, or Patrick Payton continuing to progress, or Byron Turner making a jump, right? At the same time, like I think you'd rather have him than not, but like Trayshawn Ward, if these guys are looking for star roles or like guaranteed starter roles, and the difference between them and their primary backup is very marginal, like best of luck to you. Honestly, I hope Derek goes and does great somewhere, and it goes somewhere where he can be a big fish in a little pond, probably, right? Maybe an SEC team will scoop him up. Potentially an ACC team. Like defensive end is incredibly hard to get in the portal. Florida State's experience in the portal with Verse and with Jones is not normal.
No.
Or excuse me, Verse and Johnson,
No.
is not normal, and will probably not be repeated on an annual basis. I mean, if we can be frank about this. Like, that's incredibly hard to do. So I don't know, man. Like, that's a tough spot for him. Like, do you go and look for a star role somewhere, or are you cool being somewhere between the second and fifth best defensive end on your team?
Sending you a text message I'd like you to look at.
Okay. Is it?
It has to do with recruiting. I will tell you that the original transfer window was set for May 1st through the 15th, but was moved up to the April 15th to April 30th. So it will close in April.
Interesting.
So
I never a text message.
Yeah, so Derek is a talented player, multi-year starter as far as snaps that he can show on a roster. Like I said a second ago, someone will value that skill set and he will land somewhere. Certainly wish him the best of luck. I believe this to be accurate, but I saw a report that he'll be visiting South Carolina this week. So he can start that process and figure out whatever it is the best fit for him.
Solid, man. All right. So do we worry about this defensive end room now? I mean, where's the line where you're like, I feel good,
Yeah.
I feel uncertain. Right?
Yeah, you certainly don't want to have concentrated departures. I do think that Briggs and I wouldn't group Fisk into this totally, but they do give you some flexibility there. It's not anybody that you'd want to take 25 snaps a game at defensive end or something like that, but you do have a little bit of flexibility with how you line them up and some of the packages that you can deploy. Would it in my opinion, it would surprise me if defensive end was like top at the list in the portal. If Florida State's even going to be particularly active in inbound portal in the back end of April, they've still, even with McClendon's departure, I still think they have to have another 5 roster spots open up before you start to talk about inbound. And then whatever you collectively want to make of the Destin Hill situation. I don't know if that's another scholarship that you've got to have in your back of your pocket or what. So we'll talk about Destin Hill when he's on campus. But I did want to break our policy only for that, just as a reference point for people when you're counting scholarships. So I do think the defensive end is something that might get looked at. And if you find a great fit, yes, but I don't know that it'll necessarily be top of the board.
I think that's fair. So, all right. Let me look here at some other stuff that we had in the chat. I'll hit you on the on that text, by the way.
Okay.
Because I actually do have some stuff there.
Word.
Let me see here. Okay, so DMAC, if you had unlimited, if you had like 3 or 4 more scholarships to play with when the portal opens, how do you use them? Do you try to get another pass rusher?
It's a great question. I think that, I think we talked about this a month and a half ago or so. So I don't know that please don't read my comments into like what Fuller said or whatever else, but I do think that you'd look for safety. I mean, there's value.
Yeah.
Look, let me speak real candidly here. There is value in taking a player in the transfer portal who transfers to you who has multiple years, because you can be assured that they're not going to transfer again and that you can work with them. So, if you could find a multi-year player that, and I'm not an expert at this, but when I talk to coaches all across the country, that's really what I hear. There's a level for the 1-year kid, like, okay. And then there's a little bit of a different level for the 2 to 3 year kid that you're going to have on your roster and you can work with. And I think if you could find a good fit there at safety, linebacker, defensive end, I think you'd give a solid eval to all three of those positions on the defensive side of the ball.
I think that's fair. Would you think about a receiver?
Potentially. You might think about a receiver who has a strong punt returning resume. I mean,
Yeah.
you would do that, I think. I think there's been some frustration with clarity as to who will take that role. And that's a hard position to practice for, man. You can't recreate that situation until you've got 11 guys on the other side of the ball that want to kill you, and you're trying to catch a punt in a full stadium of people that are losing their minds. It's just not, you can't really recreate punt returner in practice. You just got to get a feel for who's really wanting to do that. And that was so such a wonderful reprieve for Florida State fans, is that Micah is not some transcendent punt returner. He's a solid wide receiver who gives exceptional effort and is a good blocker, but he's great at catching the ball, which is a skill set that you haven't had around here from a punt returner in a while. And he's great at catching the ball and putting his foot in the ground and getting 9 yards. And there's a whole hell of a lot of value for that.
So I think I was probably wrong on FSU needing to get a receiver pre-spring, but some of the injuries that have occurred like since December in the receiver room, I think I would like them to get a receiver if possible. Personally, depending on a number of factors, Destin Hill obviously being one, Williamson being another, Pittman and his recovery timeline certainly factors into this as well. And I agree with you on the punt return aspect of it. When we hear about how Kentron Poitier had a big scrimmage and Norvell giving him a lot of love, that's great. And it does fit within the potential pattern of improvement of a guy like that, who was a extremely raw, big body, big hands. They knew what they were taking, right? They were taking a guy that unlikely to work, but possible to work. And if he does work, he might end up being a very valuable guy because of the size and the athleticism that goes with that size. But do we think we would be hearing about him if other players were healthy? I don't know, right? And if he is going to be somebody who's playing a really prominent role for this team, is that a number 2 for you on a national championship contending team? Is that the number 2 for you on a team that's contending for a playoff spot? Is he the number 2 for you on a team that can win the ACC? Potentially, yeah. If like the 80th or 90th percentile of his projection is what he is. But I do think that it's interesting. Like we didn't hear about him a lot last year, even like behind the scenes. So maybe this is when the breakout occurred, and it does take time at times. But I don't know. It makes me kind of question that a little bit, right? Personally, I'm just like, all right, we'll see.
Big shout out to our friends over at For the Table Restaurant Group, working on a couple different projects with Matt Thompson right now. But Charlie Park is the property that we are fortunate enough to have a focus on this year. Bud and I will be there over the weekend, the spring game. We were talking about that before we pressed record here. Just a fantastic spot over there in kind of overlooking Cascade Park, and just Tallahassee's best rooftop bar, and one of the best options that you could ever find, regardless of location, for a Sunday brunch. So awesome place there. And if you're headed into Tallahassee 2 weeks from now or 12 days from now, would highly encourage that you give them consideration. And if you're sure you're going to head over there, whether it be Friday night or Sunday morning for brunch, I would thoroughly encourage you to make reservations as such. Charlie Park Rooftopbar.com is the website, and a big thank you to Matt and his team for their continued support of the Nolecast.
Absolutely, for sure on that. Okay, so a little recruiting chatter here. Luke Kromenhoek was invited to the Elite 11 final. So congrats to Luke. That is awesome. Florida State's quarterback commit. out of Savannah. I was there watching the camp for 24/7 Sports. You can read my write-up on 24/7 Sports. I will also be joining the College Football Recruiting Podcast on Tuesday morning to discuss sort of the entirety of the camp. Look, as I wrote in my update, it was clear that he was the alpha dog, as they like us to reward typically of the camp. I was not able to stay for the entire thing. I had to leave before the very final set of drills. So unless he had a terrible final set of drills, which he did not, given that he got invited to the late 11, and I talked to people who like coaches who stayed there. Look, man, basically, as he went around from station to station, I was mostly following the alpha group, which and I watched a lot of these guys film before I went to the camp. I had a decent feel for like who I wanted to see, and then I would bird dog it around to see anybody else who might pop. All these coaches have like these evaluation sheets, right? And they have certain numbers on them. So for your station, when this group rolls through, you write down whatever numbers you like. Because a lot of these guys don't know who these kids are. They just see the jersey number that's assigned to you on the day. That's in some cases they know who you are. Like I think towards the end, a lot of these guys probably knew who like a Trevor Lawrence was or a Justin Fields because they have the internet. But almost immediately they went and they wrote Luke's number down. Just like one rep, sometimes two. It's like, yep, all right, 322, done. And one guy asked me, he's like, "Who is that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's Croman Hope. He's going to Florida State." It's like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, just really athletic. With the exception of him when he was doing his vertical jump, I really want to see what he got because they used these power vert mats and it looked like he just didn't understand how to jump on these. And it wouldn't shock me if he had like the worst jump in the entire event. I was like, bro, can't you dunk? And we were laughing, but he's like, yeah, I dude, yeah, I got videos of me dunking. I was like, right, I know, like that jump doesn't match a guy who could dunk.
Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't all come together there. That's funny.
And it's like I think if you gave him one like the traditional vert where you reach up, he is probably fine. But jumping on a vert mat because it measures like your force and then how much you weigh, your force, and how long you're off the ground to estimate your true vert, I guess, which is easier than hauling around those real tall things. And it's probably also like something they want to sell the product at high schools, I guess. But
impressive year for Savannah. What, 2 of the top 10 quarterbacks in the country or whatever.
Man.
They've got Luke and then a kid that just committed to Tennessee a couple days ago. Out of I think the Calvary Day High School down there. But yeah, Savannah's got some strong quarterback talent down in Southeast Georgia this year.
And it's not that those guys weren't good. Like that kid was good. Reeser, the guy going to Iowa, I thought had a solid day. The NC State commit had a solid day. Trevor Jackson is a kid kind of local here in Winter Garden in Orlando. Is a guy I thought was going to have a really big year last year and kind of battled through injury. But, I mean, obviously you're not allowed to comment about prospects for your college coach. So, of course, they would never talk about it. But Jim Harbaugh watched the hell out of that Trevor Jackson kid last year. Now, they just landed Jaden Davis over the weekend, who's the number 2 quarterback in the country. So, I don't think they're going to be in the Trevor Jackson market. But it was at the FIU camp with Norvell and Kiffin and Harbaugh and Mike McIntyre. And I think that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Last summer, it was really hot down at FIU before the rain came in. So I think there's some juice there. But even with those guys, and Jackson got an invite to the finals, which was cool. And I was happy for him because I was like, man, I hope this kid is not rated super highly yet, but we know he has tools. He needs to put together like a season where he throws more than 16 touchdowns to get 7 picks, right? And like stay healthy would be good. I hope that like they don't do this on rankings. They didn't. They really just did it based on who was the best through all the drills. Croman Hoke, I think the ability to throw from multiple different arm angles and multiple different positions of balance because of the athleticism he has is pretty special. He's still got kind of like a whip, like wiry frame, man. Like I think he was feeling himself. He didn't wear an undershirt underneath the little tank top they give you, but like he's got room to fill out. And,
I would say it's that comment. That, yeah.
Yeah. You know me, I've thought they've had something here for quite a long time. If you guys go back into the archives, you can say, I'm not sweating the Chris Parson decommitment at all, and that's not saying that Parson won't have success wherever he goes. He ended up signing with Mississippi State, by the way. But it was clear that night at the elite camp in Tallahassee that Croman was a far better prospect than Parson was. He just had to actually have a season first. He had not been a starter to that point. So that was encouraging there. And I know FSU is probably really happy that he got the Elite 11 invite. Go compete out in Los Angeles for the finals.
Yeah, two notes on 2025. Savannah's got the number 2 player in the country as well, defensive lineman, and then prospect that you just referenced there, Jodan Davis. I've seen play before, and because his teammate has maybe the number 1 player in the country for 2025, the David Sanders kid, who is the only offensive tackle I've ever seen that I left the game and I'm like, that kid could probably play wide receiver if he wanted to, like a freak level of athlete that I don't know that I've ever seen. So just there's your 2025 comments as we kind of run through the show.
I don't know that I've ever seen a receiver turn into an offensive tackle at the NFL level. I could be wrong, but there are multiple examples of high school quarterbacks who became offensive tackles. Lane Johnson, who may go down as like the best right tackle in NFL history, or if not one of them. He's the Eagle starter in the Super Bowl. He was a quarterback in high school. So was the Houston Texans, one of their starting tackles from Alabama State. Generally, just like these guys are athletes until the growth spurt hits. And that most of your best tackles, not all, like I think Orlando Pace was probably always like a tackled body. And I imagine some of those guys probably were. And I don't know if Orlando Brown like played any other positions, but you could have seen Jonathan Ogden playing tight end, right? And a number of these guys, like a Joe Thomas, look at this guy's frame now once he's retired from the NFL. Like really slimmed down, just looks athletic. Increasingly, this position looks athletic. I mean, like Laramie Tunzel, right? You could slim him down to 240 and he would look like an NBA player. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, Sanders definitely has a look to him, man. That kid is I don't think you're going on a limb there. We have
number 1 player in the country.
Right,
I'm not I'm not sharing. I'm not there were no hidden gems discovered. I'll put it that way. So
no, not at all. All right, so let me see here. FSU took a 2025 commit named Termel Jones out of Mandarin. I did get to see him, I believe it 77 on tournaments, really run together. I think it was Battle Miami or was Orlando Pylon. They were back-to-back weekends. Did get to see him. I think he plays on Birch's team, if I recall. Interesting prospect. Like, he's a guy who has some arm on him, good mobility. If I had to I don't have a measurement on him. If I had to ballpark, I would say probably like 5'11" or 6 foot, but he's a 25. Almost all the 25s, just so I can share this with you guys, almost all the 25s that I had circled on my sheet yesterday going in, I wrote kind of short, but 25, right? So like these guys are 15 or 16 years old. They are still growing taller. That's the one area where generally like your underclassmen group, they're just going to look shorter than your seniors group, right? I mean, like you can, I'm actually not going to show you my whole sheet, but like, right, like that. I'll show you my sheet. I'm not showing the entirety of YouTube my sheet, but like a lot of them like short by 25, kind of short maybe 25, right? Like, and then one of them's like absolutely not 5'7", unless they hit the major growth spurt, because height does matter. I think if things trend the way I think they're going to trend, I got to be smart how I say this. I think the vibes generally is that FSU hit on Brock Glenn, right? At least to where like he's not showing the early signs he's going to be a bust. He should be at least decent, right?
Quite the contrary to bust. Yeah, he's been from
Good.
what I've seen, he's been very impressive.
Yes. Early flashes, I think we can say.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging. I think Duffy has been pushed by Glenn, so there's some chance that he's still around. Croman Hope, tools wise, is just simply better than Duffy and Glenn. Like, again, we talked about prospect versus player. As a prospect, like Cromanhoek's upside is better than Glenn or Duffy. That is not guaranteed that he will hit that upside. We don't know like what percentile rank Duffy or Glenn will hit within their potential range, right? But like the 99th percent, if Cromanhoek gets every possible ounce of his ability out of him, and Glenn and Duffy do, Cromanhoek is probably a superior prospect, in my opinion, to them, right?
Yeah.
I know he hasn't played a lot of football. The chance that you have a very good quarterback entrenched by the time Tramel Jones gets on campus, or by the time any quarterback in 25 gets on campus, is very high, because this is a good quarterback room right now. You have
it's what you want. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want the days of where you're telling a high 3-star, low 4-star quarterback that he has a chance to come in and potentially play, within a year, if not earlier, which you were there about a year and a half ago. I will say that just Glenn, from watching him, and look, you're the recruiting analyst, you do this, but it has made me reevaluate what Glenn's ceiling is.
He's got a gun.
He's got a gun, and he's an athlete. He's not like a 4.3 guy, but he's an athlete, and he's a very intriguing prospect. It'll be exciting to see what they can do with him. Absolutely.
No doubt. I mean, like, Glenn remained a pretty highly rated guy, despite some really subpar numbers as a senior. Like, the rating there, common sense tells you, is it's tools based, right? He has good tools. Thus, you have to bet on that. At a certain point, like, you're kind of getting down your list, you're doing it. It's like, this guy's a pretty proven production guy, but he's 5'11 and a half. His velocity is like maybe 40th percentile. The release time is like 80th percentile. What are we really projecting for this guy? Is this guy really somebody who's a difference maker at the highest level? Like, I don't know, right?
Yep.
Like, Bryce Young is probably more like 70th percentile, 90th percentile, right? In terms of that, even though he's a smaller statured guy, for instance. So circling back to Tramel, who has a lot of growth to happen, he still has 2 more seasons of high school to play, right? I don't really love stamping like can play or can't play on a 25, unless you're just like completely tiny and older than grade level, and then like, all right, that's all she wrote, probably. I just think it's unlikely that you're going to be able to get a total stud to commit to you in the 25 class, unless he turns out to be a stud. Like somebody you get early, he's going to come in and believe in himself, like, hey, I'm the guy, I'm going to beat out everybody. And I'm sure they're going to go whale hunting and probably try to take 2 in the class potentially. And maybe Tramel Jones develops into somebody who's a real stud. But like, this is going to be a fairly stacked room, even if 1 or 2 of these guys transfer out, which I think the odds that nobody transfers out is almost 0. So it's just how the quarterback game goes now in college football. So people are like, hey, what do you think about this take? Are you okay with this take? Yeah, I'm fine with this take, man. Like, I know some guys who think somewhat highly of the guy, but they're also acknowledging, like, yeah, like, look who Florida State just got. Pointing at Cromanhoek. You got to find somebody who's going to come in and be okay competing against that, and maybe waiting your turn against that. That's just kind of how the thing goes there. Florida State got a linebacker commitment tonight from a player out of Atlantic High School. Do we want to talk about this?
Looks like Mike Norvell sent out the confirmation tweet on it, so it is
so they did take him.
Situation where we have more clarity. Yeah.
All right, so Jaden Parrish out of Under Armour Orlando. I think he's like 6 foot 210-ish. He was there. It was not a good linebacker day there. He was one of the better linebackers, I thought, on the day. I was told he tested pretty well on the day, and he's very productive. Now, if you look at offers for Jaden Parrish, and we can break down the film if you want. Well, probably not tonight because we're already at an hour. We'll go through some of this stuff, right? I mean, man, not a lot. I am not ready to call him a Randy special just yet. I'm not. No, because I don't think he's like completely without love. There are some other schools whose defensive scouting ability I do respect, who like the kid. Like I actually think, even though they don't land very many of them, I think Indiana does a nice job offering prospects on the defensive side of the ball. And I think Tom Allen is a decent defensive coach, right? He also picked up offers from Bethune-Cookman and Lafayette and UNLV, which is now headed up by a defensive coach, right? Now, I think he was on a visit out there. FSU offered March 27th. And I mean, hey, the guy's productive. I'm sure they'll get him in their camp as well. Western Kentucky offered him, by the way. You know, I'm sure they'll get him in camp and see what they can do with the guy. He said Auburn re-offered him December 24th.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I really don't like saying like, hey, this is not the quality kid FSU should be taking this early in the process, because I want to see him in FSU's camp. I want to see how he works with their staff, right? I do think it's important that you land a really, really high-level kid like a Blake Nicholson. But this guy's pretty productive. I mean, 150 tackles, tested fairly well. You know, plays two ways. He's in 3M, which is, you know, if you guys don't know, 3M is 3 Metro. I don't know. I guess I'm okay with it right now. Like, if you don't like what you see out of him when you get your hands on him in person, you know, part ways over the summer. If you like it, then cool. You hit on a guy early. I'm not going to sit here and criticize it.
Yeah. That'll be something for us and the fan base to watch in general. Interesting little development. But I think that's everything we have on the sheet, and we're right at about an hour here. If there's anything else that I missed, we can certainly address it. But otherwise, that'd be a pretty good off-season Nolecast.
I think that was pretty much everything I had. Let me see. No, that is literally everything I had, man. Enjoyed it.
Awesome.
All
right, brother. Great to get a chance to talk to you. If you do get a chance to leave us 5 stars on Apple Podcast or wherever it is that you may find the pod, know that it is gratefully appreciated, even for a podcast that's been around as long as we have. A like, subscribe, comment on YouTube is also bizarrely powerful in the year 2023. So know that your support of the Nolecast is greatly appreciated. Thank you again to all our sponsors. And as Bud said earlier, big shout out and a thank you to the Patreon members who make this show possible. Until next time, I'm Ingram. He's Bud. This has been the Nolecast, and we will talk to you soon.
right. See you, buddy.